Okay, so we have different widgets rendering for different topics. Let's go on and see what we have inside of those widgets, right? If you remember, there was different types of widgets. So there was a heading widget, there was a paragraph widget, and they should render differently, depending on the type of widget. So let's take a look at what that might look like. So in the data model, widgets should have a type, right? Where we might have here private string type, and we can initialize this as being a default, maybe a heading. Maybe you can use some enumerate data type, right, where you can only have certain valid types. That might be a good idea. And maybe we might have a default title of saying, new widget. Maybe that's the default widget, name of the widget. And we also need a setter and getter for this. So we'll generate the setter and getter for this. Okay. So let's go back to the service and let's make a couple of these widgets different things, right? So maybe widget 1. Let's leave these two as these two as heading, right? They're already heading, right? Because by default they are all headings. But let's change W2 because let's set the type to be something else. We'll say that this is a paragraph widget. Paragraph widget. And same thing with maybe W4 and W5. So this would be W4 and W5. They're both paragraphs. Yes? Okay. So if we restart this, and if we query for the widgets, if we refresh, notice that we have a couple headings and we have a couple paragraphs. Make sense? Right. So on the client, we can go and drive the UI based on this type. Right? So if we go back to the client side, right, in our widget list component, we can use that type to drive whether we render it one way or another. Okay? So what we'll do is that we can have maybe a list of all the widgets in here, and notice that we have the title. We can also not only we can render the title, we can also render the type now, right? Widget.type, presumably, right? So if we render this, notice that we have widget is paragraph, heading. If we go to 111, right, we have heading, paragraph, and heading. Yes. Okay. So what we could do is have different types of widgets, maybe in a different directory. We say these are all my widgets live in a different directory called widgets, and we might have a JavaScript where we might have a heading widget, right? And in here you might have, import React, and then you might have here const. Actually, let's make this a full-blown class. We'll probably need the class, right? So this will be class, and this will be probably export default class, and we'll call this the heading widget that extends the React.component, right? And the default is that it renders and returns, for now, right? It just returns maybe h1 heading widget, okay? For now. Right, and we can probably just copy and paste this and make this paragraph widget, graph widget, where the content might be slightly different, and this might be the paragraph widget, paragraph widget, and paste it here. So now in the widget list, as we're iterating, we could decide to render one or the other, depending on the type. So we could perhaps not have the title. And then here, depending on the type, we can say, if widget type is equal to heading, then we will render the heading widget, right? Otherwise, we can have all the different types in here. and say that if it's paragraph instead, paragraph, we will implement instead the paragraph widget, right? So that when we render, notice that we have the heading widget, paragraph widget, heading widget, right? And then we can now concentrate on what is it that we want to render for each one of the paragraphs, right? Notice that each widget has a different form, has its own little state management with drop downs and input fields. So we can delegate all that into each one of those widgets. Make sense? Another thing, notice that they're rendering all as lists. They're all rendering as lists. You might decide that you don't want to really use lists to render these. Instead of LIs, these could just be regular divs. Yes? Right. Okay, let's and you might decide that instead of having this logic here, right? Maybe a better place is to have a top-level parent widget that can hide all this logic in there. You can have maybe a well, let's copy one of these, right? And this will be called just widget. And the widget, right? This is a widget. Maybe no heading. And what we could do here is that in the widget list component, we can put this content, this logic. We can put this logic. We can copy it here, and inside of a div, right? We can put this logic in here that loads each one of these. It'll need the widget to be passed in. So this might be this.props.widget. Right, and so based on what's being passed, so instead of doing this, we have just plain old widget, pass the widget down to the child widget, and then the logic is driven inside of that widget. Okay, notice that it renders just the same. Everybody good? All right, awesome.